Hi, today we're going to be looking at the very first lab, which is Chapter 1, Getting Started, and it is the constant, variable, and data types. Okay, so let's get started. This is a long lab, it's 10 pages, but we're going to go through it, okay? So the very first thing that we're going to be looking at is constants. So the lab says declare a constant called friends to represent the number of friends you have on social media. Give it a value between 50 and 1,000. Print out the value by referencing your constant. So how do we create a constant? We use the let keyword. So let friends equal, let's say we have 900. Okay, pretty easy. And now we're going to print that constant by using the print keyword. So print, open parentheses, and we type in the name of the constant, which is friends. And obviously it prints 900 right here in the console. Now assume you go through and remove friends that aren't active on social media. Update your friends constants to a lower number than it currently is. So we type in friends equal, let's say 600. Okay. Now this gives us an error. Why does it give us an error? Well, it gives us an error because well, it actually asks you, does the above code compile? Why not? Print your explanation to the console using the print function. Go back and delete your line of code that updates the friends constant to a lower number so that the playground will compile properly. As you can see, there's some errors here at the bottom where the console is. And the reason this doesn't compile, I'm going to go ahead and comment it so that the compiler ignores it. And as you can see, as soon as I comment it, it gets ignored. And the reason it doesn't compile, and I'll print why it doesn't compile, the reason it does not compile, well, is because the friends friends constant cannot change, right? So a constant, as you know, cannot change. You can't change the value of a constant. Once we set it to 900, you can't change it to 600 or 700 or anything else. Variables you could change, and we declare a variable using the var keyword, but a constant cannot change. Okay, let's move on. So this is page 2 of 10. Your fitness tracking app needs to know goal number of steps per day. Create a constant goal steps um, and set it to 10,000. Okay, well, how do we do that? Again, we use the keyword let to set up a constant. We're going to call it goal steps, and we're going to give an initial value of 10,000. Okay, pretty easy stuff. Use two print functions to print two lines in the console. The first line should say your step goal for the day is with a colon, and the second line should print the value of goal steps by referencing your constant. So the first line is going to look like this: print your step goal for the day is, and that's what it's going to do. Oh, of course, this is a string, so you have to put in quotations, obviously. And the second print line should say print, and it should actually reference the constant that we created earlier. So in the console, you'll see your step goal for the day is 10,000. Great. Let's move on to the third page. Declare a variable schooling and set it to the number of years of school that you have completed. Print schooling to the console. So how do we declare a variable? We use the var keyword, and the name of the variable is schooling. So var schooling, and we're going to give it an initial value of how many years you've completed in school. I'm not sure how many I've completed, so I'm just going to put 20. It's a nice round even number. And then it said print schooling, so I'm going to go ahead and print schooling. There we go. And now it should print 20 in the console. There we go. Now imagine you just completed an additional year of schooling, and update the schooling variable accordingly. Print schooling to the console. So I'm going to go ahead and update. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and update schooling. So I'm going to go change schooling to 21. I'm going to go ahead and print schooling here. Oh, schooling. And it should read, the console should read 21. Perfect. Okay. Does the above code compile? Why is that different from trying to update a constant? Print an explanation. Again, I will print an explanation. So print, and the explanation is a variable can be changed, however, a constant cannot change. Cool. All right, and that should print. Perfect. So let's move on. So create a variable called steps that will keep track of the number of steps you take throughout the day. Set its initial value to 0 to represent the step count first thing in the morning. Print steps to the console. Okay, so what do we do here? So first things first, we create a variable called steps, and we give it an initial value of 0. Second of all, we print the variable steps. Perfect, that should print. Okay, now assume that the tracker has been keeping track of steps all morning and you want to show the user the latest step count. Update steps to be 2000. Print steps to the console. Okay, so very simple. We do steps equal 2000 and we print steps. All right, so now it should read 2000 here. Just give it a second. There we go. Awesome. Next page. Imagine you're creating a simple photo sharing app. You want to keep track of the following metrics for each post: number of likes, number of comments, the year created, month created, day created. For each of the metrics above, declare either a constant or a variable and assign it a value corresponding to a hypothetical post. Be sure to use proper naming conventions. Okay, so let's see here. So the first one is number of likes. Is that going to be a variable or a constant? Well, number of likes constantly change, right? So obviously it's a variable. So var number of likes, and recognize that I'm using camel case here, and I'm just gonna set it to 20 likes initially. Okay. Number of comments. Well, is that gonna change, or is it always gonna be the same amount? Well, obviously number of comments change. So number of comments, and I'm gonna say we have 4 comments. The year created. Well, if you've taken a photo, the year created can never change, right? So obviously that's a constant. So let year created equal 2017. Month created, obviously that's also constant. Month created, and let's say it's August. So August is 08. Okay, and lastly, day created. So let's say let day created. Again, it's going to be a constant because once you create a picture, the day created, the date that it was created isn't going to change. And let's say it's the, I don't know, the 29th of August. Okay, pretty cool. Let's move on here. There are all sort of things that a fitness tracking app needs to keep track of in order to display the right information to the user. Similar to the last exercise, declare either a constant or variable for each of the following items and assign each a sensible value. Be sure to use proper naming conventions. So we're doing the same thing that we did here with the photo app. So page 6, we're doing the same thing for the fitness app. So name. So is that going to be a constant or variable? Obviously that's a constant because your name does not change. So let name equals, I'm going to set it to my name. Okay, great. The second thing is its age. Well, does age change? Obviously. As time passes, age increases. So age is a variable. So var age equals 30. Let's have a look. The next is number of steps taken today. Okay, well, what does that look like? Well, number of steps taken today is obviously a variable because as you continue walking, that number changes. So var number of steps today and we're gonna give it an initial value of 2000. And goal number of steps. This is tricky because that technically could change, right? You could change your goal, but generally speaking, people have a constant goal of 10,000. So I'll accept here either let or a constant or a variable. Um, I'm gonna set it as a constant initially because that rarely changes. So let um, goal steps, and it's gonna equal 10,000 because that's usually the generic amount of steps that people set as their goal. And average heart rate is obviously a variable because as you become more active, your heart rate increases. So your heart rate constantly goes up and down. So that's obviously a variable. So var average heart rate, and let's give it a value of 70. Okay, now go back and add a line for each constant or variable declaration. On these lines, print a statement explaining why you chose to declare the piece of information as a constant or variable. I've really explained this, but I'll go ahead and do this. So print and names don't change, therefore we declared a constant. Here, um, age obviously changes, therefore we used a variable. In terms of numbers of steps today, we're gonna say obviously the number of steps change as we walk, therefore we used a variable. And for the goal, we're gonna say, this was a tricky one, remember? And say, generally speaking, people do not change the goal they set. It's a generic 10,000 steps per day. You know, I'm gonna add something though. However, this could have also been a variable. Okay. And lastly, we said average heart rate. The average heart rate constantly changes as we move around. Therefore, this was declared as a variable. Okay, perfect. Page 7, we're almost done here. Declare two variables, one called first decimal and one called second decimal. Both should have a decimal value. Look in both of their types by holding Option and clicking on the variable name. Alright, let's look at this. So we're going to create the first variable called var first decimal, and we're going to give it a decimal number, so 3.1 is a good number. Var second decimal, we're going to give it a decimal value of 4.1. Okay, now it says look at both of their types by holding Option and clicking on the variable name. So if you hold the Option key on your keyboard, and as soon as you hold the Option key, your cursor will change to a question mark if you're hovering over the name of the variable, and the variable will change to blue without even clicking anything. I'm merely holding the Option key here. So as soon as I hold the Option key and click on the name of the variable, it's going to say, okay, this variable is called first decimal and it's of type double. That's called inferencing, and Swift has already inferenced that you want to set this variable as a double since we used a decimal. If I were to use a non-decimal and I click, it's going to say int for integer. Okay, so let's change this back to 3.1. Declare a variable called true or false and give it a Boolean value. All right, we could do that. So I'm going to go var true or false, and we're going to give it a value of, let's say true. Whoa. Okay. Try to assign the first decimal so try to assign try to assign this new variable to first decimal, like first decimal equals true or false. Does it compile? Print a statement to the console explaining why not, and remove the line of code that will not compile. So let's go ahead and do that. So first decimal equals true or false, and let's see, it should give us an error, and obviously it gives us an error. Now if we click on it, it tells us why. Cannot assign value of bool, which is a boolean, to a double type. So I'm going to go ahead and comment it. I won't delete it so that the compiler ignores it. So I no longer have an error, and I'm going to print the reason. So the reason for this statement to not compile is because you cannot assign a bool type variable to a decimal or double type variable, right? Declare a variable and give it a string value. Then try to assign it to first decimal. So let's go ahead and do that. Does it compile? Well, I think you know the answer to that, but let's go ahead and try it. So I'm going to go ahead and say var, and I'm going to call the string my string, right? And we're going to give it a type string. Obviously, I could give it a type string without giving it a value, but I'm going to give it a value actually. Just some random string, right? Cool. So we've created a variable and we've given it the value some random string. And now we're going to try to assign it to first decimal. Okay, well, how do we do that? We type in first decimal equals my string, and obviously it should give us an error right here. Give it a second, and it gives us an error. It says cannot assign value of type string to type double. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and comment this out so that I could get rid of the error, and I'm going to print the reason. The reason for this not compiling is that you cannot assign a value of string to a value of double. Simple as that. Finally, declare a variable with a whole number value that's an int, then try to assign it to first decimal. Why won't this compile even though both variables are numbers? Print a statement. Okay, so the string one was sort of obvious. This might not be. So var, I'm going to call it my integer, and I'm going to give it a value of 6. And now if I were to go ahead and say first decimal equals my integer, this will still give me an error. It should. Just give it a second. Yeah. And it says here cannot assign value of type int to double. This might not be this might be counterintuitive to you, because to a human being these two things look awfully alike. This is a number and this is a number. However, that doesn't matter. These are two different types. This variable holds integers and integers only. That means whole numbers. And these variables hold decimal or floating point values, which are decimal numbers. And that's really the reason of why it doesn't compile. So let's move on here. You have declared a number of constants and variables to keep track of fitness information. Declare one more variable with a Boolean value called has met step goal. So let's go ahead and do that. So var has met step goal, and we're going to give it an initial value of true, obviously lowercase, not uppercase. When you declare a constant, for goal number of steps and a variable for current step count, you likely assign each a value in the thousands. This can be difficult to read. Redeclare this constant and variable, and when assigning each value in the thousands, format the number so that it is more readable. Okay, so let's do that. So let's go ahead and create the goal steps. So let goal steps, and I'm going to give it a value of 10,000. However, instead of writing 10,000 like this, which is hard to read, I'm going to format it with an underscore. Okay, let goal steps equal 10,000. Now you might say, well, hold on, this isn't a number. How does it accept this? When you're dealing with underscores with numbers, the compiler totally ignores underscores in numbers. So essentially what happens is, think of this underscore as almost commented. So the result actually looks like, so if I go ahead and print goal steps, you'll see what it looks like. Right? The computer totally ignores the underscore. There's no space here. So the computer sees it as 10,000. The reason we put an underscore is for us human beings. So when you're reading your code back again, or with another person in your team reading the code, it'll be easier for a human being to read. But the computer is totally going to ignore that underscore. Perfect. And again, var number of steps. So let's say it's, I don't remember what the number is, but let's say it's 2559. So it's 2000 underscore 589. So obviously this looks like 2589, but if I were to print it, number of steps, the computer doesn't see the underscore, it just sees a number. Okay, great. So let's move on to the second last page here. Declare a variable called name and of type string, but do not give it a value. Print name to the console. Does the code compile? Remove any code that will not compile. Okay, so how do you do this? Well, we start with the keyword var to start a variable. The name of the variable is name, and usually we do this and then we give it a value, but it's telling us do not give it a value. Well, if I don't give it a value, how do I say that this variable I want it to be a string? Because if I don't give it a value, Swift is not gonna know which value to give it. So what I do is I put a colon here and I tell it I want this variable to be of string type. Okay, so now I've got a variable and I'm telling it that this variable is of string type. Now the variable actually has no value, so let's go ahead and print the variable name. So if I go ahead print and name, I should get an error. Why do I get an error? Well, a variable name used before being initialized. Being initialized is a fancy way of saying you haven't given it an initial value. It's empty right now. I can't print something that's empty. So if I were to do this, it should work and it should print hi. But as soon as I remove the value, it should give me the error again. Cool. Okay, now assign a value to name and print it to console again. So let's go ahead and do that. So name equals else, and I'm gonna go ahead and print it. Print name, and it should, let me just finish that, and it should print my name and the error should go away. No, variable used within its own initial value. Oh, sorry, I didn't take this out, that's why. Okay, there we go. So I've declared a variable and now I've given it a value of aus and I've printed it. Great. Declare a variable called distance traveled. Okay, so var distance traveled and set it to 0. All right. Do not give it an explicit type. Obviously, there's type inferencing in Swift, like I've said before. So if you hold the Option key and click on here, it'll say that it inferenced, Swift has inferenced that this is a type int. Now assign a value of 54.3 to distance traveled. Does the code compile? As you know, the answer will be no. Why is that? Well, let's just do that first. Distance traveled equal 54.3. We should get an error. So it says go back and send an explicit type to distance traveled so the code will compile. So here there's an error. The console gives us an error and this gives us an error right here, and it tells us cannot assign value of type double to type int, and that's essentially the error because this is of type it's a decimal, and this variable is an integer. So if I were to erase this and make it 54, I get rid of the error. The error goes away because this is an int. So if I go ahead and do 54.3, the error comes back. To fix that error, all I have to do essentially is to tell it, listen, this thing distance travel, yes, set it at 0 initially, but I actually want it to be of double. It's a double variable. So this variable is no longer an int. So if I click on option and I click on it, it says that this variable is of double type. And so I force this variable to be double. Swift initially would inference it as an integer. So now that it's a double, obviously doubles can hold floating point or decimal type numbers, so there's no error here and everything's good. Fantastic. Okay, so let's do the last page here. Last page, you decide that your fitness tracking app should show the user what percentage of her goal has been achieved so far today. Declare a variable called %completed and set it to 0. Do not explicitly assign it a type. So again, we use the var keyword %completed, and we give it a value of 0 because it says do not explicitly assign it a type. Great. Imagine that the path partway through the day, a user has taken 3,467 steps out of the 10,000 step goal. That means she is 34.67% of the way to his or her goal. Assign 34.67 to % completed. Does the code compile? Go back and explicitly assign a type to % completed that will allow the code to compile. Okay, so let's do this. So if we were to assign % completed a value of 34.67, obviously that will give us an error. The error is that this is an int. Again, if I hold option and I click, Swift has inferenced that this should be an int because I've given it a value of 0. If I don't want it to have a value, if I don't want it to be an int, I'd have to tell it explicitly, listen, make this a double type variable. So I put the colon, I say double, and I give it the value of 0. And now this works, and it's a non-issue. Okay, great. So that was the first lab that covered variables and constants and how they differ, and types, and how you can't assign different types to each other. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.